The second Half-Life is the first game in the series that got an official Russian dub. And as a matter of fact, the game actually received 2 official Russian versions.
Кстати, Гордон, рад тебя видеть.
Гордон, рад тебя видеть.
The first one was done by the company named CDL International. Their version has been used for over a year after the game's initial release. The dub that they made was
Алекс? Гордон? Боже, как вы сюда попали? И когда?
not ideal to say the least, so a year later, in 2005, a Russian company by the name of Buka Entertainment came out simply to redub certain characters from the first version in order to fix it. And today, I've decided to compare both of these versions simultaneously. I assume most of you will probably be very confused as to which of them is gonna play at any given clip, so in order to make everything less confusing, the subtitles are gonna have different colors to represent which version is currently being heard. Something I feel like I should point out before going forward. So, without further ado, let's start with the voice acting, with the first voice you will ever hear after launching the first chapter, G-Man, voiced by Alyx Vance. His voice is easily one of the best parts of both versions. Most quirks that the original G-Man has are still present here.
Проснитесь и пойте, мистер Фриман, проснитесь и пойте. Нет, я не хочу сказать, что вы спите на работе. Никто не заслуживает отдыха больше вашего. Так проснитесь же, мистер Фриман. Проснитесь, вас снова ждут великие дела.
It's rather unfortunate that the guy didn't get any more screen time after this. The sound quality of his microphone most of the time made it seem as they were going to make an ASMR or something, talking directly into my ears to the point where I could hear his breathing.
Чем обманывать вас иллюзией выбора, я сам возьму на себя эту привилегию. Я уверен, вам все станет понятно после того, как... Я не вправе сейчас говорить это.
Sometimes he also tends to mispronounce words. One time he calls our protagonist Pre-Man instead of Freeman.
Я прошу прощения за то, что кажется вам деспотичным навязыванием своей воли, доктор Приман. Пока, скажем просто, что вас час снова пробил.
But it fits him, since this character is supposed to sound unhinged and alien. I'm pretty happy with how they handled G-Man, a nice 5 out of 5. Next, in no particular order, we have Dr. Wallace Breen, voiced by Boris Sasta, who is later changed to Nikita Prozorovsky in the second version. The differences between the two are huge. Let's start with the first Breen. His voice sounds just like the original.
Добро пожаловать! Добро пожаловать в Сити 17. Сами вы его выбрали или его выбрали за вас? Это лучший город из оставшихся.
Welcome. Welcome to City 17. You have chosen or been chosen to relocate to one of our finest remaining urban centers.
Я уверяю вас, подавляющее поле будет снято в тот день, когда мы овладеем собой, когда мы докажем, что больше в нем не нуждаемся.
Let me assure you that the suppressing field will be shut off on the day that we have mastered ourselves, the day we can prove we no longer need it.
It's pretty amazing how similar they sound at the first glance, even though the Russian Dr. Breen in comparison to the original is definitely a step down.
The man you have consistently failed to slow, let alone capture, is by all standards simply that, an ordinary man. How can you have failed to apprehend him?
Тот, кого вы не сумели ни остановить, ни тем более поймать, абсолютно обычный человек. Как вам удалось не задержать его?
If you see this so-called free man, report him. Civic deeds do not go unrewarded, and contrariwise, complicity with his cause will not go unpunished. Be wise, be safe, be aware.
И если вы увидите этого человека, сообщите нам.
Ваши заслуги перед Альянсом будут вознаграждены. Соучастие же в его делах не останется безнаказанным. Думайте, остерегайтесь, знайте.
If I'd known you were going to come straight up to my office, I wouldn't have bothered hunting you in the first place.
Если бы только довелось знать, что вы сами заглянете в мой офис, я бы вовсе не стал утруждать себя поисками.
He doesn't really sound as intimidating as the original. He seems more like your average school principal, rather than an aspirated old man with power. He sorta starts to shine a little bit during his monologue to the player near the end of the game.
Итак, это вы, доктор Фриман. Я бы сказал, что это приятный сюрприз, но это не сюрприз и, согласитесь, не слишком приятный. Скажите мне, доктор Фриман, если сможете, вы так много разрушили. Создали ли вы хоть что-нибудь? Можете назвать хоть одну вещь? Я так и думал.
But then, unfortunately, his acting immediately falls apart.
Они знают, что ты их предала. Они отомстят. Джудит, доктор Моссман, пожалуйста.
I think this laugh of his is a perfect summary for this performance.
Dr. Breen.
And for that, he gets 2.5 out of 5. Next, we have the second version of Dr. Breen, voiced by Nikita Prozorovsky. Unlike the first version of Breen, this one is completely different.
Добро пожаловать! Добро пожаловать в Сити-17. Сами вы его выбрали или его выбрали за вас, это лучший город из оставшихся.
He doesn't sound like the original in any way whatsoever, nor does he sound like the previous soft version of him.
Итак, это вы, доктор Фримен. Я бы сказал, что это приятный сюрприз, но это не сюрприз и, согласитесь, не слишком приятный.
Honestly, his voice itself and how he acts fits incredibly to this guy.
Весьма признателен вам, доктор. Сначала вы привели меня прямо на порог дома старого друга, а теперь изволили явиться сами. Когда наступит коллапс сингулярности, я буду очень далеко. В другой вселенной, если быть точным. Вы же к тому времени будете уничтожены всеми возможными и даже некоторыми невозможными способами.
With a strong voice such as this, he is way more convincing as a dictator.
В такое время необходимо, может быть, напомнить себе, что наш истинный враг — это инстинкт.
And why some people would genuinely follow him. If he was able to get into this position of power, then surely this person should know how to appeal to a large group of people, and have all the necessary skills to achieve this.
Я уверяю вас, подавляющее поле будет снято в тот день, когда мы овладеем собой, когда мы докажем, что больше в нем не нуждаемся.
Now there's one neat thing about the previous version of Dr. Breen that was lost in this one. It's a minor detail and it's not even about the voice acting, it's just that I find it cool.
Добро пожаловать в Сити-17. Здесь безопаснее.
It's safer here. He doesn't say that you will be safe during your stay in City 17, but at least it's safer than in other places you could have ended. Interesting wording. I wish the game had more of that.
Добро пожаловать в Сити-17. Здесь безопасно.
Well, that was a fucking lie. As much as I like this new iteration of Breen,
Что это? Положи сюда.
there's a couple of problems that ruin him pretty badly. What I mean by that is there's a glitch that happens in chapters Water Hazard and Our Benefactors during his monologue, which is actually a part of some much bigger issues in this version, but I will address those later. Just watch this.
Теперь есть твердые доказательства того, что среди нас появился изменник, который в глазах иных граждан предстает как мессия.
And he stops. He doesn't say anything for the next 10 seconds, and then he continues.
И все же, наивные умы наделяют его романтическим ореолом.
The game, for some reason, doesn't play this sentence in the middle, leaving a weird gap where the character just sits there and makes funny faces. The worst part about it is that it's not even the old version of the game, that's how the modern version operates. To fix this, alongside some other things, you have to download this unofficial patch, where its author explains that the reason these lines don't play is because they set the incorrect riff value, whatever that means. But besides that, everything works just fine. Still, it's pretty damn awful. The fact that this version was released in 2005 and yet no one could have been bothered to fix this simple mistake, so instead you have to download something off the internet if you want it to be fixed, is very disrespectful. But that's only the beginning, wait till you see. So next we have Metropolis, voiced by Oleg Miroshnikov. His voice acting fits nicely to this guy, sounding no less intimidating than the original. What these guys are lacking though is a better voice filter. The one they've got is simply just a little pitch down with a radio effect on top of it. It definitely works and it doesn't break the immersion, it's just I wish they'd reach the same level as the original.
А теперь положи ее в мусорку. Порядок, можешь идти.
Hell, even Barney's filter sounds better.
Помощь нужна? Нет, сам справлюсь. Я уж поболтаю с ним наедине.
Similarly, Combine soldiers are voiced by the same actor as Metrocops, but unlike those, Combine soldiers' speech is noticeably faster, and they also speak in a more robotic way. I don't know if the actor was actually chattering that fast, or did they make him like that afterwards.
Оружие к бою, возможно, опасность. Внимание, граната! Держать позицию. Вижу цель. Отряд уничтожен, требую подкреплений.
The reason I'm not entirely sure about that is because Metrocops also speak fast sometimes, except they do it artificially.
Последнее предупреждение. На помощь. Район высокой важности. Проходи. Двигайся.
They're obviously sped up for whatever reason. It could have been a minor issue that wouldn't really matter that much if everything else in those two adaptations worked perfectly, which they are not. We'll talk about that later. Next we have the Rebels, voiced by Boris Isarov and Katerina Burgess. Of course, there is no point in ditching these actors entirely, since both of them are not attached to any specific or reoccurring characters, therefore it would make a lot more sense to redub the most problematic ones. And it also kinda makes everything seem a little bit more real. Let's discuss the male NPCs first.
Гордон Фриман, у тебя получилось. Мы говорили с Алекс. Посмотрю, смогу ли я связаться снова. Не верю своим глазам. Гордон Фриман собственной персоной. Доктор Фриман, Барни сказал, вы в пути. Нас рассеяли снайперы. Он в ангаре прижат к земле огнем. Идите, он рассчитывает на вас.
He's got that weird mannerism which makes them all sound really goofy and abnormal.
Я смотрю, они и твой чемодан взяли. Им это с рук не сойдет.
He sounds like a foreigner who just recently learned how to speak Russian while also trying his hardest to speak without an accent. And it's not like his voice itself is anything outstanding either.
Я собираюсь силами. Я не заметил, как ты сел.
And what's with that sound quality, by the way?
Опять доктор Брин? Я надеялся, что в 1014 видел его в последний раз. Я бы не стал так громко говорить. Это его опорная база.
Well, at the very least in moments when they need to shout, they do it really well.
Сюда! Помоги! Берегись! Берегись, Хопперов! Они везде!
And when they become a part of your squad, they sound pretty genuine and natural.
Гордон Фриман, и как раз вовремя. Доктор Фриман, мы идем с вами.
I didn't mention that earlier, but Boris Isarov isn't actually the only voice that male NPCs use to talk. There's another additional voice actor for two distinct characters, one by the name of Matt, the guy with whom we'll encounter Manhacks for the first time, and Sandy, the guy who shouts, "Poor Laszlo!" Both of them are played by the same mysterious actor. Let's just hear what they have to say.
Радуйся, что ты не тот, кого они ищут. У этого неудачника вообще нет шансов. Похоже, они созывают все подразделения ГО и Сиги-17. Они заполняют все перед собой манхеками. Тебе надо уйти до того, как начнут искать.
О, черт!
Wow, that was absolutely horrendous. How could anyone in their totally sober mind think, yes, this is perfectly fine, let's use it in our video game?
Слушай, здесь небезопасно. Я тебе дам кое-какие припасы, а потом тебе надо все-таки будет уйти.
Are you kidding me? Is that the best take you got? You do realize that the G-Man's excuse I gave you earlier will not cut it this time. Oh, you can't be serious.
Вы сделали очень многое за короткое время. Похоже, не созывают все подразделения ГО и Сиги-17.
It's rather unfortunate that the guy didn't get any more screen time after this. My wish came true just at the right time.
Они заполняют каналы манхэками. Тебе надо уйти до того, как тебя начнут искать. О, черт! Слишком поздно!
See, despite the weird timing of this line that doesn't fit particularly well with the body movements,
О, черт!
it's still much better than this.
О, черт! Слишком поздно.
Okay, so that was that. They replaced the guy to make the scene better, but what about the other dude? Well, they didn't change him, unlike the first one.
Эй, ты! Стой, где стоишь! Оставайся на камнях! Не становитесь на песок! Не злите муравьиных львов!
Лазло, не двигайся.
Нет, на помощь! Боже, бедный Ласло! Лучший из своего поколения. И такой конец.
Yep, this guy only works as an ASMR YouTuber. But you know what? I shall never forget your sacrifice and everything you went through to deliver this message to the next generation of gamers. Oh, right, let's get back on track.
Гордон, вам это удалось. Энергия от цитадели идет через это здание. Перекрыв поток, мы сможем мобилизовать больше людей для борьбы с Альянсом на местах.
That's right, you thought the second version of Breen would be the only one who has missing lines. Nope, our man right here, in the first version, has this sort of thing too.
The Combine's gonna feel the squeeze. We dropped a crate of rockets coming across the plaza. If you can make it there, you should have everything you need to take down these Striders.
These last two sentences from this man have apparently vanished into the Shadow Realm, but unlike Dr. Breen, these ones are missing for a completely different reason. I tried all three different patches for this version of the dub, but none of them had those last two lines. And just like with Dr. Breen, this thing happens more than once. No other character has that sort of an issue, only the male NPCs.
Помогите! На помощь!
I don't actually know what must have happened there, but I think it all comes down from the very first unpatched version of this dub. Back when the game was released, the male NPCs were even more broken than what you see here. So it begs the question, just how bad were they back then? Well, pretty much all male NPCs' lines are mixed between each other. See this man over here? He says this.
Возможно, мы встретимся позже.
Which actually belongs to this guy, and he says this.
Не пейте воду. Они что-то туда подсыпают, чтобы мы ничего не помнили. Я даже не помню, как я сюда попал.
Which actually belongs to this guy, and he says this.
Черт, я думал, ты легавый.
This kind of buggery once again highlights the goofy nature of this man's voice acting.
Я больше не могу.
Что-нибудь придумаем.
Что же нам делать?
I have no idea where that line came from, but the way he says that name, like, dude, why'd you say it like that? But anyway, let me show you some more examples.
Поторопитесь, доктор Фриман, Новопроспект рядом. Мало шансов пройти туда в одиночку. Но если с тобой стая муравьиных львов, это другое дело.
That line is supposed to be coming from this guy just right after the player gets the bug bait to control said antlines, while this guy himself says this.
Мы потеряли Даниэлса.
Everything this man say either ends up being something someone else says in the near future,
Первое предупреждение отойти.
Лучший город из
В порядке, я иду.
Проходи.
Такого высокого мнения.
Я бы не стал так громко говорить. Это его опорная база. Это какая-то ошибка. У меня обычный миграционный билет, как у всех. Ну, вот и конец линии.
Станция 12,
Не в самое лучшее время ты пришел.
or some of that stuff could just be something that's not even used in the game at all.
Радуйся, что ты тут не живешь.
I could be wrong on that one, but I genuinely never heard of them say anything like that.
Отлично. Хорошо, ты нашел нас? Ты не первый, кто был здесь. Эй, прекрати!
Это Фримен.
Порты теперь на
Судный день
нашей
Альянса
стороне.
настал.
Главная станция совсем рядом. У них припасы для тех, кто хотят, полагаю, сирены по тебе. Позволь ему помочь тебе.
If there is someone listening to this video at this moment in time who can explain how the Source engine manages to work with voice lines for their NPCs, I will be glad to know a little bit more about that and what might have caused this to happen. Maybe when they implemented all these lines into the game, something gone wrong along the way, causing all of them to displace like it's fucking Minecraft sand. The fact that this is the state in which the game was released is absolutely unacceptable. Fortunately, all of that was fixed in the next patch, but the damage was already done, since there is still some missing voice lines. 4 of them, as a matter of fact. Now, they did try to sort of fix this incoherent mess by reusing some generic lines your squad would usually say to you.
Мы с вами, доктор Фриман. Скажите, если надо чем-нибудь помочь вам.
It sort of works, I guess, but that doesn't really say much of anything.
Okay, Doc. You'll have to go on foot from here. There's a secret path along the cliffside, but no one's going anywhere until we fight off this attack. Having you here to fight alongside us is going to make a big difference for morale.
I believe they should have just recorded these missing sentences, just like Book Entertainment did in their second version.
Ладно, док. Дальше придется пешком. Вдоль утеса ведет тайная тропа, но мы не пойдем туда, пока не отразим атаку. Вот теперь комбайнам не поздоровится. На той стороне площади стоит ящик с ракетами. Сумеете туда добраться, добудете все необходимое, чтобы сбить страйдеры. Вон туда. И смотрите под ноги.
Мы думали, тут будет безопасней. Мы и не подозревали, сколько их тут. Остальные ушли вверх по лестнице. Испытать удачу со снайперами.
I wish I could say they did a good job with that fix if they didn't leave the previous actor's voice.
Есть кто наверху? Помогите!
На помощь! Помогите!
Сумеете туда добраться, добудете все необходимое, чтобы сбить страйдеры.
Ведите, Фриман! Один готов!
Эй! Ты Фриман, верно?
I know this would probably be an overkill for these people to try to fully re-record these NPCs in order to remain consistent, but it's either that or having people speaking with 2 very distinct voices. I guess you can see which option they chose. But you know, it definitely works when their generic lines aren't getting in the way.
Вот, взгляни на это. Вот это вот дамба, прямо по курсу. На старой ГЭС прячется Илай, но попасть туда с этой вертушкой охотником на хвосте, считаю, нереально. Хорошие новости. Вартигон что-то там шаманит над твоим катером. Он станет помощнее.
Yeah, in this scene he sounds like he's super drunk, so this was fixed in the second version.
Вот, взгляните сюда. Это дамба, она прямо по курсу. На старый ГЭС прячется Илай, но попасть туда с этой вертушкой охотником на хвосте, считайте, почти нереально. Хорошие новости. Вартигонт что-то там шаманит под вашим катером, так что он станет помощнее.
But in this next example, they screwed up really badly.
Послушай, мы лишь наблюдательный пост подземки. Главная станция совсем рядом.
Они направят тебя на путь.
Пока позволь моему другу Вартигонту дать тебе хороший заряд бодрости.
They re-recorded this one line in the middle and left everything else as it is.
Главная станция совсем рядом.
Они направят тебя на путь.
Пока позволь моему другу Вартигонту дать тебе хороший заряд бодрости.
Why? Why would you do that? And most importantly, was this intentional? Probably not, but this is the result we've got nonetheless. And with that out of the way, let's move on to the female NPCs. In comparison to males, they sound fine.
Они будут искать тебя. Беги. Ты ничего тут не можешь поделать. Как раз вовремя, док. Нам нужно уйти, пока Альянс нас не обнаружил. Мы как раз готовимся уходить. Доктор Фриман, вы шутите? Я была на связи с Алекс. Они схватили ее отца.
Although I'm really not a huge fan of her performance, especially in moments where she sounds like a child.
Эй, доктор Фриман! Эй, вы же Фриман, верно?
To the point where she can't even pronounce her lines properly.
Вы с Барни старые друзья, не так ли? Может, вы поможете ему? Снайперы подстерегли его на крыше ангара.
Jeez, calm down, woman. I mean, you were speaking normally just a second ago. Why the sudden rush?
Может, вы поможете ему? Снайперы подстерегли его на крыше ангара.
Is it because those are two separate takes, then the actress doesn't remember the tone of her voice prior to this sentence?
Может, вы поможете ему? Снайперы подстерегли его на крыше ангара.
Who knows? Generally, female rebels in Half-Life 2 are less frequent than the males, and so, as a result, there are not a lot of scenes in the game where you can improve them.
Эй, вы же Фриман, верно?
Эй, вы же Фримен, верно?
Эй, доктор Фриман, я надеялась, что вы появитесь. Я и воздушный катер приготовила.
Эй, доктор Фримен, я надеялась, что вы появитесь. Я и воздушный катер приготовила.
Not much there, except she sounds less awkward, and considering the fact that they were executed the same way as the males, they also ended up having the same issue where one person can just speak with two different voices.
Остановитесь! Мы ни в чем не виноваты!
Они будут искать тебя. Беги, ты ничего тут не можешь поделать.
Сумеете туда добраться? Добудете все необходимое, чтобы сбить страйдеры.
За Фрименом!
Next, we have the Overwatch announcer, played by Natasha Radsky, and she is just as soulless and ruthless as the original. Her voice fits flawlessly.
Вниманию жителей. Замечено отклонение численности. Сотрудничество с отрядом ГО награждается полным пищевым рационом. Отряду гражданской обороны. Признаки антиобщественной деятельности. Код. Собрать. Окружить. Задержать.
Союз 2. Сотрудник убит. Набор рабочей силы. 5. Потерян сигнал отделения ГО. Штук 6. Рентген. 8. Сотрудник убит. Оставшимся силам задержать.
Yeah, there's not much to say. It's 5 out of 5. So let's move on to Vortigaunt's, played by Diran Migreblyan. His voice fits alright, he definitely sounds like a Vortigaunt.
Это Фримен. Судный день Альянса настал. Фримен должен поспешить. Илая Венса держат в тяжкой неволе. Приветствую, Фримен.
But unfortunately, they don't have that sort of deep hoarseness in their voice, and they also speak in pretty much the exact same rough manner all the time.
Freeman must excuse us. It is rude of us to commune by flux shifting in front of those whose vortal inputs are impaired.
Мы просим прощения. Невежливо общаться сменой потоков перед теми, у кого нет вортальных способностей. Мы рады, что Eli Vance высокого мнения о Фримане. Eli Vance заслужил доверие.
That's the only reasonable explanation I can give as to why these guys always seemed a bit flat here to me.
Да, мы озвучиваем свой язык из вежливости. Если только не говорим о вас плохо. Именно.
Funnily enough, Vortigaunt share the same voice actor with Eli Vance. It's quite spectacular because I've never known about this fact until I started making this video.
Гордон Фриман, дай-ка мне взглянуть на тебя, господи, да ты ни капли не изменился, как тебе это удается?
Фримен почтил нас визитом.
Alright, now let's get down to our main cast, starting up with Alyx Vance, voiced by Larisa Kuznetsova, and then later replaced by Жанна Никонова in the second version.
Помните его по черной мези старого администратора? Только не говорите с отцом о докторе Брине.
Her interpretation of Alyx is quite clunky. Most of the time when she opens her mouth, it sounds as if she stands in the most uncomfortable position possible, while still trying to play her character somehow.
Я нашла его в городе, шатался где попало, вечно с ним одни неприятности.
Her acting is one of those things when you know it's bad, but for some reason you struggle to find words to explain why. It's as if you put a prompt into some obscure AI text-to-speech, and it tries to imitate how human beings usually speak. It surely sounds like a human and it even succeeds at fooling you, but I can definitely notice some bits in the voice revealing that it's not.
Алекс, а я-то думала, ты на посту. Вортигонты отпустили меня, чтобы я смогла увидеть Гордона. В любом случае, я должна работать над порталом.
Jokes aside, every once in a while she can nail her performance quite well, even convincing me that she's not actually all that bad.
Гордон — это пес. Мой отец сделал его для меня, когда я была ребенком. Первая модель была вот такая, но я его немного нарастила. Да, песик?
But later on she does this, leaving me to wonder once again whether there's actually someone pointing a gun at her head.
А где доктор Клайнер?
And that's why it's so unnatural and awkward as hell.
А где доктор Клайнер?
Long story short, her acting is inconsistent. First she's awkward, then she's normal, then she's a robot, but then she's your drunk stepmother.
Ты обвиняешь меня?
But then she's good and later on bad once again. Initially I did not expect to find anything to admire in her performance, since I always remembered her acting to be god-awful. But I guess it all comes down to the fact that the human mind mostly tends to remember the bad stuff as opposed to the good. Like when you get hundreds of positive comments but there's one negative out of the bunch, so your mind kind of focuses on it as opposed to everything else. At the very least, that's just how it usually works for some people. And with this version of Alyx, I'd say she deserves a fair, she's not as horrendously bad as I thought she was, from me. And now it's time to move to the second version of Alyx, voiced by Жанна Никонова.
Полагаю, ты Фриман? Нам надо спешить.
This one in particular is interesting for me to compare back to back. It took me quite a bit of time to get why I think the second version of her is better than the first one, besides the fact that I'm feeling more attached to it due to my nostalgia, and at this point I think I figure out the answer. First and foremost, Nikonova's performance throughout the whole game doesn't have moments where I want to plug my ears as it does in the first one with Kuznetsova. Secondly, her voice in general fits the character far better than Kuznetsova's, considering at that time Жанна Никонова was 32 years old, whereas Kuznetsova was already well in her 40s, which is not a remarkably bad thing, but I noticed Жанна Никонова definitely sounds younger while listening to both of them.
Попробуем найти Моссман. С этой станции мне легче будет попасть внутрь.
Попробуем найти Моссман. С этой станции мне легче будет попасть внутрь.
Я полагаю, вы доктор Фриман.
Полагаю, ты Фриман.
Вот она. Ха! Попалась!
Ха! Вот она. Ха! Попалась!
I guess it feels like that because she sounds more eager than the first version. And yet, here's the thing, the second version of Alyx is the one I prefer the most, but there are still certain moments in the game where I believe she has done worse than Larisa Kuznetsova, and it only happens at specific moments where the character expresses either anger or panic.
Черт бы ее побрал, я не верю!
Черт бы ее побрал, я не верю!
Твой отец крайне необходим для любого нашего исследования.
Хватит нести чушь!
Твой отец крайне необходим для любого нашего исследования.
Хватит нести чушь!
It's an interesting pattern to me because it highlights the different approach both studios had during the time when they made their respected version. Larisa Kuznetsova had a lot of references as to how the English actress performed any of her lines, to which she must stick as if her life depends on it, while Nikonova seemed to improvise a lot of the time with no actual restrictions or relying on its source material besides some basic information, which in this case ended up being just a better version overall.
But where's Dr. Kleiner? А где доктор Клайнер?
А где доктор Клайнер?
And despite having worse performance in some places here and there,
О, черт, что это за координаты? Куда она его отправила?
О, черт! Что это за координаты? Куда она его отправила?
they don't even come close to being as bad as Kuznetsova's worst moments.
Как будто нас ждет. Вартигонты отпустили меня, чтобы я смогла увидеть Гордона. Ты обвиняешь меня?
Я старалась защитить его.
Заткнись и радуйся, что ты нам еще нужна.
Which is why I think the first version gets 3 out of 5 and the second version gets 4.5 out of 5. And now we're moving to someone who actually did an incredible job, and that is Judith Mossman, played by Rita Weissman.
Я отведу вас к Илаю. Он мне не простит, если я вас задержу.
Out of all characters, her performance sounds the closest to the original by far.
Доктор Фримен? Гордон Фримен? Это вы? Вы добрались так быстро? Представляю себе изумление и облегчение Илая.
Dr. Freeman? Gordon Freeman? Is that you? You've made it here this quickly. Well, Eli is going to be amazed, not to mention relieved.
Pretty much in every point where the English Mossman does a little laugh in between words or where she tones her voice down a little bit.
You promised you weren't going to touch Eli.
The Russian Mossman manages to replicate all of that seamlessly.
Вы же обещали не трогать Илая. You promised you weren't going to touch Eli. We could certainly use the extra help around here.
Нам точно нужна дополнительная помощь.
We've covered a lot of ground the last few months, but things would go so much faster if we had more people with your training.
Мы много сделали за последнее время, но все шло бы быстрее, будь у нас больше людей с твоим опытом.
It is apparent that she had way more frame of reference than other voice actors, with maybe another exception, but we'll get to him later.
Да, послушайте меня только. Я говорю как юная аспирантка. Не могу поверить, что наконец-то мы будем работать вместе.
But besides those particular scenes, her performance is just alright.
Не сопротивляйся, бесполезно. Ты ничего не сделаешь, пока не окажешься, где он хочет. Простите, Гордон. Вы же обещали не трогать Илая.
Он был слишком заманчивой целью, чтобы просто отпустить. Особенно при отсутствии Гордона Фримена.
Вы получили бы Фримена, если бы были терпеливы и ждали моего сигнала.
She perfectly adapted the original actress's performance. There's almost not a single scene in the game where I can say, yeah, that delivery of that one line was pretty shit. Except for this moment right at the end of the game.
Прости, Уоллес. Твое время вышло. Нет?
You know, this small line, a line that contains only one word, has reminded me of something. You all probably heard about this game called Atomic Heart. It was released not too long ago, and there's a scene in the game which I think is extremely similar to the one you just saw mere seconds ago.
Граната!
Was this on purpose? Am I supposed to take this stuff seriously? I mean, just look at this. He opens his mouth as if he's in that bizarre Burger King commercial that doesn't even match with the way he pronounces the word grenade at all.
Граната!
Not to mention the fact that the situation didn't seem to face this motherfucker in the slightest considering how he sounds.
Граната!
And the grenade didn't even kill him. He got killed by some sentient red goo or something. But I think I'm already getting too deep into that. The point is that this scene in Half-Life 2 is the best example of how you can turn an intense moment on paper into a comedy sketch. And it's all because of one badly performed line.
Нет.
So, who do we have next? Of course, it's Odessa Cabbage, who's probably played by the same actor who voiced Combine soldiers. I say probably because Kupigolos only lists him as the voice for Combine soldiers, while on hl2source.com they list him as Cabbage soldiers. Go figure.
Управляемая ракетная установка – лучший способ сбить штурмовик. Привет. Я сейчас подойду.
I'd say this is the second best performance in the dub, even better than the original.
Сначала это его только разозлит. Но если вам удастся не только выжить, но и несколько раз попасть, можно считать, жизнь прожита не зря.
And yet for some reason it's tied to the least important character in the game.
Now, where was I? Yes.
I can definitely hear him slowly pulling his little mustaches while saying this line.
I couldn't have asked for a finer volunteer.
And I'm also pretty sure they gave him this silly British accent, better yet performed by an American actor, only just to make him sound more comedic. His Russian counterpart, on the other hand, doesn't have it, which is why I think he works better overall.
Проклятие. Дайте мне только предупредить точку маяка, и я помогу. Вперед! Покажите тому штурмовику, где раки зимой.
He's still maintaining his original delivery while not sounding too over the top. I mean, we're playing Half-Life and not TF2, right? So he gets 5 out of 5, and now we're moving to the actual best performance in the dub version, Father Grigori.
Но кто это? Еще одна метущаяся душа? Я присмотрю за тобой. Больше я ничего не могу обещать. Ты расшевелил ад! Это мне по вкусу! Вот, у меня есть оружие получше. Тебе пригодится.
By far the most memorable performance in the game. Literally nothing to complain about.
Отлично, брат мой! Используй мои ловушки, но смотри, сам не попадись в них.
Except for this.
Так-то лучше! Григорий, ты уже встречал мою паству.
Yeah, that was that broken version you just heard. In this scene he was supposed to say this.
Better and better. I am Father Grigori. You have already met my congregation.
But instead it just cuts this little piece out of this line, and now we've got this abomination.
Так-то лучше, Григорий.
There is a fixed version out there.
Я Григорий.
And I guess Book Entertainment or Valve kind of forgot to patch it.
Они идут. В Ревенхолме нет покоя. Иди, встретимся в церкви.
Still, the guy gets 5 out of 5 from me, as it's not his fault this scene ended up this way. And how can I forget about our own HEV suit? played by Natasha Ratsky, who is later changed to Olga Kuznetsova. That particular change has always been peculiar to me, as I don't see any reason to change her in the first place. She's perfectly in line with how the original was.
Обнаружен серьезный перелом. Система жизнеобеспечения включена. Морфий введен.
Major fracture detected. Automatic medical systems engaged. Morphine administered.
Обнаружен тяжелый перелом. Система жизнеобеспечения включена. Морфий введен.
Боезапас исчерпан.
Ammunition depleted.
Боезапас исчерпан.
Maybe they didn't like how soulless the suit sounds and so decided to make it sound more human-like, I guess, like your chatbot assistant. I really don't know. And it also ruins the fact that the woman voicing the suit is the same one who re-recorded some female NPCs in the second version.
Эй, доктор Фримен, я надеюсь, что вы появитесь. Обнаружена кровопотеря. Я и воздушный катер приготовила.
Other than that, it's fine, just like Eli Vance, he's alright.
Доктор Брин, он руководитель всего этого отвратительного предприятия.
Алекс, Гордон, неужели это вы не верю своим глазам? Черт тебя побери, Брин, отпусти ее!
He fits into the role pretty decently, even though he doesn't have that deep of a voice as in the original.
Welcome to the lab anyway. It's not Black Mesa, but it served us well enough.
Добро пожаловать в лабораторию. Это не черная меза, но тоже неплохо.
He's pretty much the same as Vortigaunt's in that regard, but in this scene where Black Mesa East is getting attacked by the Combine forces, he sounds nonchalantly, as if he just got out of his bed.
Алекс, дорогуша.
Что там происходит?
Алекс, где ты?
Мы застряли в шлюзе мусорного отсека.
Гордон все еще с тобой?
Он здесь.
Хорошо, вы двое должны...
At least his iconic
Dad, please.
is arguably way funnier in the dub than in the original.
Пап, пожалуйста.
So he deserves 4.5 out of 5. From one old guy to the other, here's Dr. Isaac Kleiner, voiced by Sam Yossman and later changed to Dmitry Polonsky.
Мы обязаны доктору Фримену, несмотря на порождаемые им неприятности.
Yossman's interpretation is a hit or miss for me. Sometimes he sounds fine, I guess. At the very least, I can imagine someone speaking the way that he does.
Извини, док, но посмотри-ка, кто здесь.
Черт возьми! Гордон Фримен! Как неожиданно!
And sometimes he pronounces his lines in such a way that just feels awkward.
Боже, Гордон Фримен! Это ведь вы, верно?
Which in itself should sound plausible enough considering we're talking about Dr. Kleiner, and awkwardness is not something that doesn't fit his character. The problem is that he pronounces his sentences so slowly sometimes to the point where it seems like he's about to pass out.
Ламара снова сбежала из клетки. Не зная Барни, подумал бы, что он расставил ловушки и... Боже, Гордон Фримен.
And it's all because the translated text here is way shorter than in the original, and so the actor is desperately trying to be in sync with it, even though he doesn't have that many words to work with.
Lamar has gotten out of her crate again. If I didn't know better, I'd suspect Barney of trapping and... My goodness.
Ламара снова сбежала из клетки. Не зная Барни, подумал бы, что он расставил ловушки и... Боже!
Other times when he's relatively normal, his acting is as bland and fake as me, when I'm dead.
Док, раз уж он идет не по улице, можно его и переодеть.
Что? О боже, ты прав, я почти забыл. Слава богу, как гора с плеч.
Even though I don't have anything against his voice itself, the acting is what ruined this version of Dr. Kleiner. He's not awful, he's just meh. And fortunately enough, the second version of Dr. Kleiner, voiced by Dmitry Polonsky, is just a direct upgrade from the first one in pretty much every way.
Боже, Гордон Фримен, это в самом деле ты?
He has a better voice, a better actor, and generally he's way closer to that kind and caring Dr. Kleiner we all know.
Можно ему и костюмчик дать.
Что? О боже, ты прав, я почти забыл. Алекс? Гордон? Боже, как вы сюда попали? И когда?
Что случилось?
Дорогая, я и не надеялся увидеть тебя вновь.
I don't know, he just sounds like the kindest grandfather on the planet. I have no complaints about this actor whatsoever. And it seems there is only one character left to talk about, and it's the one I decided to save for last. His name is Barney Calhoun, whose voice actor remains completely unknown, which I would find very insulting if I were that guy. Every other actor is listed, but not him. I know Barney is extremely unreliable, but what did his actor do to you? Before I say anything bad about this, remember that broken build of the first stop I mentioned earlier, where a bunch of lines ended up in wrong places? In it, Barney, for some reason, doesn't have this combined filter on his voice. So you can enjoy listening to him there in his full glory, crystal clear.
Пройдемте со мной, гражданин. Да, я поболтаю с ним наедине.
As if I was asking this version to be even more cursed than it already is. No way anyone would take this moment seriously after hearing this actual Boy Scout trying to be tough and stuff.
Пройдемте со мной, гражданин. Да, я поболтаю с ним наедине.
Oh yeah, I must talk about his voice now.
Помнишь, я должен тебе пиво. Ну что, он здесь? Вот ты где. Черт, Гордон, ты разворошил улей.
It's bad. Not only he doesn't sound like the original in any way, not even slightly, but he also has the same issues as Alyx. Well, the first version of her, and that is being completely unaware how to play their character at any given scene.
Надо побыстрее, а то возникнут подозрения. Я же никогда не выполню норму избиений. Если увидишь доктора Брина, передай ему, чтобы он шел. Можно не прятаться. Нас заметили. Вот проклятие.
I don't get this guy. Are you annoyed or surprised, disappointed? Just what are you?
А вот и...
You're fighting so you can watch everyone around you crying. Think!
Я думаю.
Of course, I'm exaggerating. Sometimes he can be alright.
Да, чуть не забыл. Кажется, ты потерял это в черной мезе. Удачи тебе, приятель. Она там нужна.
In others, he's just bland, as if this is his first time voicing someone in his life, while at the same time not giving too much crap about anything.
Нужно попасть в то здание, чтобы открыть ворота. Устройство подавления будет подавлять всех проходящих, пока его не отключишь. Сколько охраны? Там явно есть что-то интересненькое. Давай, док, я жду здесь, пока ты его не отключишь.
This guy just doesn't fit into the setting. He sounds way too young and often gives the impression of a whiny man-child.
Вот черт, вот чего я боялся. Давай сюда, Гордон, пока ты меня не засветил. Что за черт?
Что это?
Да, это же твой хренов любимец. Гордон, я не могу двигаться. Чертовы снайперы подстрелили меня.
There's nothing to enjoy about this performance. It's not so bad, it's funny.
Я поболтаю с ним наедине.
It's just bad. There's one unintentionally funny moment from him that only happens in the broken version, I'll give him that, but I don't think anyone would unironically consider playing it just for a small chuckle that lasts only 2 minutes. But hey, everyone loves memes, so why not make him a meme, I guess? Right? Anyway, let's switch to the Booker's version, shall we?
Я должен тебе пиво. Гордон, это я, Барни из черной мезы. Прости, что напугал. Я разыгрывал представление перед камерами.
This right here is the exact same situation as it was with Dr. Kleiner's role, except this time we went from complete dog water to perfection.
Ладно, Гордон, тебе придется идти до лаборатории доктора Клайнера самому. О, черт, этого я и боялся. Давай сюда, Гордон, пока ты меня не засветил.
This version of Barney Calhoun is everything that the previous one wasn't. His voice sounds a lot closer to the original, he doesn't get on my nerves, the performance is quite nice, and he has an attitude of a more laid-back kind of guy.
Oh, man, that's what I was afraid of. Get in here, Gordon, before you blow my cover.
О, черт, этого я и боялся. Давай сюда, Гордон, пока ты меня не засветил.
It's definitely an improvement from whatever that delivery was supposed to represent.
О, черт, вот чего я боялся. Давай сюда, Гордон, пока ты меня не засветил.
So this change right here was 100% reasonable, boosting his charisma to a whole new level, at least in comparison to the one that came before.
А вот и...
А вот и... Убери от меня эту дрянь!
Чтобы уговорить ее выйти оттуда, уйдет еще неделя.
Если повезет, то и дольше.
Барни, ты не любишь животных?
Just listen to that same sound of disgust he did in the previous version and tell me what it reminds you of.
Барни, ты не любишь животных?
I think he's having a good time.
Что за черт? Да это же твой чертов мозгосос!
I'm genuinely impressed how good he is, even without comparing him against the first version. He's got emotions and stuff, some sass in the way he says things that don't sound out of place.
О, сколько охраны. Там явно есть что-то интересненькое. Давай, док, я жду здесь, пока ты его не отключишь. Будь осторожен.
So let's just give it a 5 out of 5 and move on. You may have noticed that there were lots of praise to the second version of the dub in terms of voice acting. After all, they took bad performances and replaced them with new and better actors. They re-recorded some of the stuff that was missing from the first one, both successfully and not, but in addition to all of those things, they've also made lots, and I mean lots, of translation improvements. And it's actually baffling how many errors were there before.
Я тоже не ожидал, док. Он собирается сесть на экспресс до Новопроспект.
You mean the train that I tried to get on just a minute ago? Sure.
Я тоже не ожидал, док. Он чуть не сел на экспресс до Новопроспект.
Прекрасно.
Гордон, отключить систему!
Ooh, that is a rough one. First and foremost, her acting is...
Гордон, отключить систему!
Ugh. And second, how in the world did you manage to screw this little line this horribly?
You gonna let Gordon throw the switch?
Гордон, отключить систему!
I guess some of that stuff was translated out of context, which is basically the reason why every other mistake managed to slip in. It gives the impression as if there were multiple people working on this, with no sense of coordination.
Смотри, Гордон, это мой отец, я его вызволю.
Вы нашли Илая?
Нет, благодаря тебе.
I wasn't sure where to put that little exchange in particular,
Вы нашли Илая?
Нет, благодаря тебе.
as I wasn't quite sure who to blame here.
Нет, благодаря тебе.
Was it because the actress or someone who was guiding her didn't know how this line is supposed to be delivered?
You found Eli? No thanks to you.
Вы нашли Илая?
Нет, благодаря тебе.
Or was it the translator who didn't quite get a grasp on the context of this scene?
Нет, благодаря тебе.
At the end of the day, I came to the conclusion that this was definitely a translation error. Book Entertainment didn't fix shit, by the way.
Вы нашли Илая?
Нет, благодаря тебе.
You're a fucking disappointment.
Вы с Барни старые друзья, не так ли? Может, вы поможете ему? Снайперы подстерегли его на крыше ангара. Он отправился набрать гранат, но я уже сомневаюсь, что у него это выйдет. Вперед, доктор Фриман!
Doesn't this mean he'd just be straight up dead, especially the way she words it, like he wasn't shot by just one sniper, but 2 or maybe even 3? Even Barney confirmed this.
Гордон, я не могу двигаться! Чёртовы снайперы подстрелили меня!
I mean, thanks for respecting your silly continuity, I guess.
Maybe you can help him. Snipers trapped him up on that warehouse roof.
I can't move. These snipers got me pinned down.
He wasn't shot by them, he was just trapped. And Book Entertainment has fixed this in their version.
Гордон, я не могу двигаться. Чёртовы снайперы не дают мне поднять голову.
Except for this woman, she still says the same thing.
Снайперы подстерегли его на крыше ангара.
And oh man, I still have more examples to go through. It's so bad.
Мы собираемся создать базу для атаки на цитадель.
Гордон и пес тебя отведут.
That doesn't make any sense.
Я переправлю доктора Клайнера в более безопасное место и найду вас.
Я приведу всю возможную помощь.
What scene was this dialogue meant for? And also, weren't you the one who was asking for help and not the other way around?
We're planning to set up a staging area for attacking the Citadel.
Gordon and Dog can head your way. I want to get Dr. Kleiner somewhere safer. Then I'll meet up with you.
I'll take all the help I can get.
Man, the first version just can't stop shitting itself. Somebody stop this!
Мы собираемся устроить здесь базу для атаки на цитадель.
Гордон и пес придут к тебе на помощь. Я переправлю доктора Клайнера в более безопасное место и найду вас.
Мне пригодится любая помощь.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
На станции 7 вам помогут. Нужно только немного подняться по реке. Это старый красный амбар.
That part really bothers me. The way the sentence at the end is phrased sounds like it's a completely irrelevant piece of information. To better understand what I'm talking about, here's my 3 stages of involvement. First,
На станции 7 вам помогут.
okay, I understand, I need to find this station. Second,
Нужно только немного подняться по реке.
up the river I go.
Это старый красный амбар.
Wait, what? The fuck do you mean the river is a barn? Where did that come from?
Нужно только немного подняться по реке. Это старый красный амбар.
In retrospect, it's obvious what she actually meant by it, and if we compare this against the original, the wording in both of them is completely identical, except when you hear this in the Russian version, it sounds confusing, as if the people who translated this part aren't actually native to the language. Regardless, since I wasn't the only one who got confused here, Book Entertainment decided to rephrase that whole part into something that makes a lot more sense.
На станции 7 вам помогут. Нужно только немного подняться по реке. Увидите старый красный амбар.
I will find help at Station 7. To find it, I have to go up the river, and when I get there, I will see an old red barn. Simple and understandable. Let's move on. And at this point, I'd say Book Entertainment did a fine job in fixing the translation errors in the first version, even if their success rate is about, I don't know, 80% maybe. But still, there are changes in their version that seem rather unnecessary. The Combine in the Half-Life universe were always referred to by using the word Combine, and in the first version of the dub, they appropriately were calling them by using the word Alliance, which is a fine translation all things considered.
Нам надо спешить. Альянс может и трудно раскачать, но если уж это сделать, лучше им на глаза не попадаться.
Ваши заслуги перед Альянсом будут вознаграждены.
Он перешел по контролю Альянса.
Ты все это время работал на Альянс.
И Альянс вознаградил его, дав ему власть.
However, once Book Entertainment took over and started developing their version on top, they also decided to add another term to these world-conquering aliens, Combine, which is basically just a direct translation from the word combine. So they now have two very distinct terms which are both referring to the same thing and they're using them interchangeably. Both of these versions work on their own, I believe, but together, not entirely.
Комбайнов может и трудно раскачать.
Твой костюм можно заряжать от источников питания Альянса. Вот теперь комбайнам не поздоровится.
Ваши заслуги перед Альянсом будут вознаграждены.
Осторожно, Гордон. Я засекла сенсоры комбайнов впереди. Ты все это время работала на Альянс.
And I understand what they were trying to do here. In English, the word combine can have multiple meanings, like they combine different species to be part of their forces, or that they themselves is an empire of some sort, or they are like a combine that harvests Earth out of its resources. But in Russian, this word has a very straightforward meaning, so by adding another term, Book Entertainment tried to compensate for that. Did it work? I'll say that I like when things remain consistent, so no, I don't think so. Next.
Ему нельзя здесь долго оставаться. Это поставит под угрозу всю вашу работу.
Не волнуйся, он пойдет со мной.
Oh, I'm sorry, you meant to say our work?
We can't keep him here long, Doc. It'll jeopardize everything we've worked for.
Don't worry, he's coming with me.
Ему нельзя здесь долго оставаться. Это поставит под угрозу всю нашу работу.
You just can't have your cake and eat it now, can you? Now I know Book Entertainment's version wasn't perfect for what I've shown over the course of this video.
Это поставит под угрозу всю нашу работу.
Barney wasn't even halfway through his last sentence and Alyx already started to talk over him. If he hadn't made that long pause between these two sentences, then it would have been totally fine.
Ему нельзя здесь долго оставаться. Это поставит под угрозу всю нашу работу.
And there are dozens of scenes in which that same thing occurs multiple times. This next part is the best example. Kleiner starts to describe the conditions of his teleporter, which is a pretty long sequence of scientific words to fully deliver.
Conditions could hardly be more ideal. That's what you said last time.
But in the second version of the dub, Kleiner's rambling goes on for so long that Barney starts his line way before Kleiner finishes his own.
Мне удалось подобрать верные параметры манифольда для базы CI и орбифольда LG, включая функцию Гильберта.
And not only that, Kleiner himself starts to interrupt himself.
Условия лотереи 2-1.
This whole thing is so poorly timed it's unreal. These people don't want to keep up with the pacing so badly that even the environment around them doesn't match with what they're saying.
2-1. О, господи, что на этот раз?
And what about this scene with Dr. Breen?
Контроль над вами обоими гарантирует мне возможность диктовать любые условия сделки Альянса.
Oh, I guess this idea was so funny he couldn't keep himself intact. Oh, silly old man. And this happens a little bit during his speech here too.
Инстинкты воспитывали нас, когда мы только становились. Инстинкты предупреждали нас и оберегали нас.
Well, at least they try to keep him in sync with the original, unlike here.
В этом прорыве нет моей заслуги, док.
Глупости. Твой талант превосходит даже твою
Давайте
красоту.
убедимся, что эта штука работает, ладно?
Получилось?
And here,
Но попасть туда с этой вертушкой охотником на хвосте, считайте, почти нереально. Хорошие новости.
and here,
И присваивают ему такие опасные поэтические прозвища, как «свободный человек» и «прокладывающий напомнить вам об опасности».
what happened to you guys? Your version is so much better than the first one. Why do you have to be like this?
You give a calculator to a fucking retard, he's gonna try to turn on a TV with it.
By the way, would you believe me if I said that this nonsense was somehow worse way back in the day? You see, in 2013, Valve decided to introduce Steam Pipe, an update to their platform Steam that changed the way it used to store data, which affected their video games in some ways. This thing also heavily messed up a lot of mods on the Source engine on various websites after that update came out, forcing their creators to make a patch so that their mod could work again with this new system. Not only that, but Steam Pipe also managed to break some of Valve's official titles, of which they apparently didn't care all that much since there weren't any fixes or even acknowledgement from them. And before the Steam Pipe update came along, the dialogues in Half-Life 2 and its episodes used to work differently as well. It used to be the case that when a line is longer than it should be, it didn't just cut itself off, but instead it used to overlap on top of the subsequent line. Now, I'm not an expert on this topic, I'm just trying to make sense based on the information I read online, which is only partially true as it turns out, because the overlapping still happens in the current version as well, so you can take all I've just said with a grain of salt.
Я научился пропускать возгласы неверующих мимо ушей, поскольку подавить их было я не привык. Возможно, я научился пропускать возгласы неверующих мимо ушей, поскольку я не привык.
Regardless, what we got out of all that was just a tiny bit better, I guess. I don't know, all of them still suck. Anyway, now I must summarize what we got out of this whole discussion. Both versions are messy, and people who made them should be ashamed of why they ended up being as bad as they are. CDL's version was just nonsense. There are almost as many good qualities as there are bad ones. Book Entertainment's version changed that. They improved the acting, they improved the translation, except for some places, but they ruined the pacing of the dialogue. Overall, their version still remains superior. And that's all there is to say. Thank you all so much for watching. This video took quite a bit of time to make, and not because it was a particularly difficult one to make, but rather really long. I had some heavy stuff going on with my mental health over this last year, so yeah, I really appreciate anyone who watched it thus far. And if you want to financially support me, you can find links on my Boosty and donation alerts in the description. Since I can't monetize my channel through views, even if I wanted to, I'm only left with those options. And I'm sorry for that. But anyways, have a good one.